Welcome, everyone, to another fantastic episode of Double Book. Today, I'm joined by two brothers responsible for unleashing Three Rivers Plague onto the world, which, let's be honest, is the most chaotic, rock-infused apocalypse you will ever experience. This book has everything: undead nightmares, plague cults, mobsters, bioweapons, and one rock star who may or may not save what's left of civilization, depending on how sober he is. They're co authors, co conspirators, and possibly the only people who can get me to care about a post apocalyptic Pittsburgh. Please welcome the dynamic duo of dystopia, Zachary and Joshua Forbes. How's it going, fellas?
Pretty good.
Heck yeah, we're ready.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys jumping on, man. I've been looking forward to this conversation since we got this booked. And I went through and read your story and loved it. And yeah, I've been super excited. So I appreciate both you guys being on.
It's an honor.
Oh yeah, no, it's great to talk to somebody who's read the book. It's not always a privilege that we get, having a host who's actually read the whole thing all the way through.
I am definitely going to read all three of them. It's 100% going to happen. I had too much fun with the first one not to continue with the other two. So we got some awesome people that jumped on. I want to say hey real quick. Yes, that is Rick Thunder. 100%. That's Rick Thunder. How's it going, Grifton? And Cena. Awesome, Cena. Good seeing you. Appreciate you being here. So again, I'm super excited for you guys to be here. I always like to start by saying again how much I truly loved your book. I think I'm going to love book 2 and book 3 based off where you progress this story to go. I think I'm going to enjoy the next two even better, even though I love the first one. But for those not familiar with your work, what's a good elevator pitch for your whole series as a whole? So the Continuum series, what's a good elevator pitch?
You got it.
Good elevator pitch. It changes all the time. We're always tweaking, trying to figure out what gets the most clicks. I would say the way that I think appeals to people the best is it is the story of somebody who is coming from this world of success. He's a rock star. He's got his band of friends. Seems like he has it all going for him, but deep down he's very flawed and he's struggling with internal conflicts, addiction, anxiety, the kind of stuff that kind of comes up from beneath the surface. And when this biological weapon gets unleashed, it forces the world into chaos. Important people, such as this band, are brought to a shelter in order to protect them because they're necessary for rebuilding, along with government figures and other important people. But because our main character, Thomas, is more rebellious, not quite as authoritative or connected to that kind of world, him and his friends take a different path. One of them ends up getting infected, and so they have to go out into the real world away from this shelter and see how they can help their friend. And that puts them face to face with everything that the world has to offer now. Like you mentioned in the intro, undead cults, mafia groups, various kinds of undead, horrific creatures, all sorts of crazy, wacky, almost Mad Max-esque gang-related stuff. And it was a really good time writing these characters that you don't really see in post-apocalyptic stories, and how they would interact with this kind of world.
Perfect. There's one other part that I want to go through and add on to this amazing book series. These aren't just your normal infected. They are all different. They're all intense. If you're a video game fan from the 90s, it gave off the Left 4 Dead type zombie awesomeness. I love that game so much. And this book reminded me of a book version of Left 4 Dead. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but that's the vibe I got. And I loved every part of it. Every time you brought in a new kind of infected into the story, I got really hyped and really excited to go like, oh man, how would I go through and take out some of these chaotic monsters that you guys threw at us? I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, we've got a lot of video game influences, actually. Not the least of which is Resident Evil. It's a little bit of Fallout in there, but we definitely grabbed a lot from not just post-apocalyptic media in general, but specifically video games. We like to treat our world as if it's kind of this fleshed out map almost, and we have a very clear picture of what it looks like in our heads. So it helps us to navigate it in the story.
So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Let's dive a little bit deeper. When you said you had that vision in your head, so let's go back to when the first idea came up. How did this idea come up? Was it a character? Was it a story arc? Was it just, hey, we play some awesome video games, let's try a book series with it? How did the idea come up?
I think a lot of it came from me and him playing Fallout 76, which was not a good game by any means, but the ability to play a story like that multiplayer and have these characters that can build relationships, that got my head turning a little bit. And then quarantine hit. I didn't really have a lot to do. He was kind of going off to college and stuff. So I just sat down and wrote the first chapter of a story, and then I sent it to him.
Yeah, and that wasn't particularly great at the time, just because we weren't authors. We didn't really know much about writing and rules and stuff. But I didn't know any better either. So when I read it, I was like, oh, wow, this is something tangible. Like, maybe we can actually make our own story, our own world out of this. And it got me turning, and we learned, we spent a lot of time reading and studying and figuring out how literature gets constructed. We learned about keeping in one head and maintaining tense and kind of the 3-act layout of a story. And as we learned, we just kind of sculpted this first book into a full, we call it a post-apocalyptic epic because it's long and, it's several episodes. So we try to make it digestible, but it's a big story. It's a big world, and it's got a lot going on. But it was a slow crafting process, like chiseling a statue, just from that first chapter that he sent me because he was bored. Fun story.
And he's the one who actually came up with the idea of using Pittsburgh, because this first chapter I sent him was in Philadelphia. And so he's been to Pittsburgh before, and he thought the terrain there was really interesting, and just the locations.
Yeah, Pittsburgh is it feels like a map from a video game. We like the state of Pennsylvania. We think Pennsylvania is a very good, hosh posh of American culture. You kind of got everything going on there. You've got the Northeast city. You've got the Pennsylvania rural farmland, and then you've got the West middle America coal miners stuff going on. It's kind of just everything in one state. So we knew we wanted to set it there. That's a pretty good default place for an apocalypse story in America. But like Josh said, initially it was in Philadelphia. That first chapter, which you've read, was set at Lincoln Financial Field. But after I went to Pittsburgh, where my fiance is from, I got such this great vision of a story because of the way the city is in the middle of these 3 rivers, which is why it's called Three Rivers Plague. And, the mountains surrounding it, almost like a border wall, right? Like in a video game. And just all the different, unique locations, which we send them to all over the place in the book. Every place they go in the book is either a real place or based on a real place. And that was the inspiration for the setting, was this city that I'm visiting for the first time just seemed like it was so rich for a story, especially in the ruins of it. And so we put those pieces together, and that's how we came up with Three Rivers Plague.
So how much of that first chapter is in this book? Was it the bare bones of it? Was it just the nugget of an idea, or is there more to that first chapter that showed up in Three Rivers Plague?
I think in terms of just the way that first chapter flows, it's pretty much the same. I think we liked that idea of an opening with a concert if your main characters are a band, The story actually opens from the perspective of two cops who witness something happening at the stadium. Felt very cryptic, very ominous. Of course, the actual prose itself changed quite a bit to be just in Thomas's head, but yeah, I kicked that.
That was pretty loud. No, yeah, we like you said, we added cuts because we switched from one person's head to another. We changed the prose. Obviously we edited it a billion times, but Josh's idea of introducing the cast through this almost spectator perspective was such a good idea, especially for someone who'd never written a story before, really, at least nothing like this long, because everyone tries to figure out how to do that. There's the cliche of we're going to start the story of the character looking himself in the mirror, and that's how you describe what they look like. He was standing beside the sink and he saw his eyebrows falling over his brown eyes. Like, that's how you get a picture of the character in the reader's head, because the character's looking at himself. But the way Josh did it was up on the big screen while these two cops are handling security, there's Thomas and there's Harvey and Nick and the whole band, and you describe what they look like from an outside perspective because these people are putting on a show and everybody knows them. There's t-shirts with them on it, right? And when it finally gets to Thomas's head, everybody gets introduced in kind of this concert style introduction. And it was just a great, easy way to say, this is our cast, without feeling too forced or cliche or anything.
Yeah, it was an amazing, fresh open to a story. And I also really liked the premise of your main cast being a band. I've not seen that before, and the dynamics, and it wasn't just, hey, they're a perfect band. You felt the struggle within the band itself, but also with what you would assume a rock and roll band deals with is a lot of addiction aspect. And that's a big part of this book, is Thomas dealing with his own addiction and self-doubt. And it's just, there's an extra layer down. You usually don't get those within a post-apocalyptic story. It's normally military-based. I have all this experience, bang, bang, kill things, have a great day. It's action. It's usually impactful, a lot of fun. What made you guys decide to go that different route of adding in an actual extra layer down with talking about addiction and things like that within your story?
Well, there is military in the story, obviously. We have the National Guardsmen who work for the governor, and we have some characters from federal agencies and all that. Because obviously that's going to be a presence. You can't realistically tell this kind of story without those elements existing. But something that's really important to us is the characters are the forefront of the story. The story is about the characters. It's not about the story. And so every conflict that the characters face internally, every internal conflict already existed before the story begins, before the end of the world, right? Thomas was an addict already. Huey was kind of anxious and uncertain of himself. Harvey was trying to restrain his anger and get away from his past. Nick was a little too egotistical and sure of himself. All of those things existed already. And this apocalypse, this plague, forces those things to come out and really plays with them and develops them beyond their struggles. And that's kind of what the story is. The story is not necessarily band versus zombies, as cool as that sounds. The story is Thomas and his group overcoming their own struggles because they're forced to face this world that wants to tear them apart. And that's what matters most is the characters specifically and what they're going through.
Yeah, and I think in another sense, we both just love music. I think I speak for both of us when we say like we wouldn't get through our day-to-day lives without music. And so we have these rock stars like Kurt Cobain and Tom Petty, who of course are very heavy into that kind of world of drugs and all that. And that sort of has caused them to lose lives a little faster than everyone would have hoped. And so it's almost a like turn into a good ending for that kind of a story.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm really curious because you guys are the first authors that I've spoken with who co-wrote a story together. So I'm really intrigued on the dynamics of how to go through and co-write a story. Did you guys outline together and decide, hey, we're going to split chapters? Did you one focus on action while other worked on dialogue? How did that dynamic go through and work when you were writing the story?
I think at the start, obviously I wrote the very beginning, so I sort of wrote a bit on from the beginning. He chose a chapter for a really creative scene idea somewhere later in the book that he just wrote. It was like the third chapter we ever wrote. It was crazy. I loved it. And he kind of carried on from there. And so we have these two ends of the story moving at the same time. And then eventually, once we got enough of that done, we were able to make a real outline of what should happen, what needs to get where. And then we chose what chapters we thought we could write the best.
Yeah. And because you've read the book, I can tell you that the chapter that I wrote first, the very first one I wrote, was in the Wall, the episode The Wall, when Thomas and Nick first go back to the synagogue laboratory, and the whole situation, the hostage situation happens, and then they come back to the cabin. That scene was the first thing that I wrote. Oh, wow. After we kind of outlined a little bit of what the story was going to look like. So we knew these characters were going to be there and how it was going to play out a little bit. But I just wanted to write something just crazy. I thought, okay, we got the opening. What's almost a climax of the story? And writing that really motivated us because we were like, okay, we know where it starts. We know where the peak of the craziness is going to get. Now we got to write everything in between and wrap it up after. And, since the first book, our strategy has changed a little bit. Every now and then we still do jump ahead and one of us will write a chapter kind of out in left field. But we try to plan it a little more now because we have this world and these characters that already exist. So we outline a little more and we divide up and say, why don't you write this character's stuff and I'll write this character's stuff. Especially with the third book that just came out, because the third book has a younger character in it that Josh kind of took the mantle of, he took the reins of, and then I kind of stayed with Thomas for most of it. So that one had a pretty different way of writing it compared to the first two, when we kind of just almost picked arcs. We almost picked episodes that we were going to write. I go ahead and write one, he writes the first one, that kind of thing. So it's ever changing, trying to see what works best for us.
So from a characters and personality perspective, since Josh was the one who had the initial idea, did you go through Josh and go hey, these are the characters' personalities, this is what they would and wouldn't do? Or did you guys collaborate a little bit more on characters and kind of where you wanted them to go within the story?
I think we collaborated on what I would consider the main two characters of Thomas and Kennedy. We really fleshed out their personalities and backstories, which helped because they're based on characters we'd created a while ago. Most of the band was kind of free flow. I tried to play off what he wrote in the future. He tried to play off what I wrote in the past. And we obviously had to go back and edit dialogue and everything to make sure it sounds like the same person saying it. But I think for the most part, we just kind of went back and forth.
Yeah. It gets easier the more books you write in that series, because once you have a continuity, like Thomas has been around for 3 books now. Usually Joshua and I can agree on where Thomas is going to do certain things, how he's going to react to certain things, just because we kind of know where he's at this point. When we introduce a new character, it takes a little bit of outlining. We kind of have to tell each other, this is what I'm thinking their motivations are. This is, what drives them. And then we see as we go how we want them to react to situations. That first book was obviously the hardest one because it had all entirely new characters. But the story kind of came together as we wrote it. We knew how we wanted it to play out, and the way the characters were helped with that immensely. Making certain characters more inclined to take certain actions, whether they were more macho or whatever. It helped the story move the way it needed to while still feeling natural to who the characters were.
Oh, all right. So you mentioned something I really want to dive in a little bit more with it. You said with the main two characters, you guys kind of agree on where things are going, but I'm really curious on that first book. How did you guys go through and decide when you did not agree on what a character would go through and do? How did you guys, like virtually arm wrestle? Like, what did you guys go through and do to figure out where the story was actually going to go?
Fist fights, usually. So there's every book, we like to say there's one like really big debate that nearly just destroys the series and we have to burn everything. And in the first book, it came down to whether a character was going to be able to go in and take out a group of guys and get his stuff back.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the team no, he was the team yes. And usually we just have to sit in the car for an hour, fight back and forth, call each other names until we can finally let our egos go and just say, okay, this is what makes the most sense for this character. Eventually, as you write, the characters almost start making their own decisions. Zach told me that, and I thought it was really good the way he writes it, where when he's writing, he has a general idea for a chapter, but if it feels like Thomas would do something else, he's going to write what Thomas would do. And that makes sense to me.
Yeah, the characters drive the story. The story shouldn't drive the characters. Real quick, that was Bowen in the comments there that you just put on the screen. He read a book for us. He beta read Long Caldera Run. That was the prequel novella to our series. And it's kind of like a spy thriller type thing, like pre-apocalyptic, where you just get to see kind of the politics of the world. And Kennedy's the main character of that one. That book's a little bit of a spoiler for Three Rivers Plague. So it's not a huge spoiler, but it is a reveal that happens towards the end of the book. So if you've read Three Rivers, then it's easy to understand. Otherwise, it's just going to spoil a little something. But I actually really like that novella. I think it's one of our best works. And Bowen said he really liked it. So that's Long Caldera Run. That's just one of our works. But yeah.
Is it go over the big reveal at the end?
Yes.
Is that what it's about? Okay.
The big reveal in the underground lab.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, it has to do with that in regards to Kennedy. And obviously Kennedy's friend. So definitely recommend that one if you're more interested in spy thrillers, or if you're more, if you've read Three Rivers, definitely recommend that one. It's a pretty quick read. But Josh is right. Every now and then we have to fight about something. Usually it's kind of about a plot beat. We don't fight that much about what a character would do. Sometimes we disagree and we just talk it out. Because usually it's kind of an objective truth, like whether a character would do something a certain way. Especially when they've been in 3 books, like you kind of know, this is just who this character is. But it helps being able to talk to someone else. Having Josh here, like, if it was just me fighting in my own head about how things were going to play out and what characters were going to do, it'd be a lot harder because I'm not going to kick myself in the nuts. But if I say something to Josh and Josh is like, no, that's stupid, that wouldn't happen, then that's me getting a kick in the nuts, which I probably need in order for the story to turn out how it could be at its best. So a little bit of friction is healthy. It's healthy for the story. And it only gets bad enough that we have to be physically violent every now and then. Not always.
And he wins because he's like double my size. So
Exactly.
So you've mentioned this a few times, and I know what it is, but I want for those who are watching to really understand what you mean when you say episodes of this book. And by the way, I loved it. I love the episode idea. So do you mind going through and explaining what you mean when you say episodes?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, you got it.
We're always fighting again. See, it's
got
violent. Episodes it's our way of making it digestible. I don't know if you can hear that car alarm going off. I apologize.
You're good. You're good.
So we have an episodic structure because we want to be digestible for our readers. We like being accessible. We like making our readers feel comfortable. And I know when I read a book, especially a long book, something that really makes it easy breezy for me is stopping points. Shorter chapters, somewhere where I can put down the book for a second and take a break. Honestly, when I have more stopping points, it makes me more likely to continue to read because I'm like, oh, I can just do one more. Like, it's not that long. I'll do one more. I'll get to this stopping point. And so breaking up the story, which is pretty long, it's a pretty long book, but breaking it up into 9 episodes, each one's about 6 chapters, sometimes a little longer. That makes it so much easier because if I say, well, I'm going to sit down and read 6 chapters tonight, I can do that. That's very realistic. I can lay in bed and read 6 chapters. If I say I'm going to lay down and read until I'm tired, well, then I might not get that far because I don't know how long I'm going to put up with it. So it's kind of a mental thing. It's really just give them as many stopping points as we can. And at the same time, there's a little bit of a story arc in every one of those episodes, like how it would be in a television show and a season of television. So that's kind of our mindset with it. Very mental, we just want to be comfortable with our readers.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I went through and felt. I felt like I was watching an episode of a show, even though it was a few chapters. It was like, okay, this is a story within the overarching story of the book. And it was great because I was like, okay, I'm going to go through and knock this part out during one sitting. It made the book, again, the book's not a small book. These are thick books, but I feel like I ran through them extremely fast because of the episodic, how you guys went through and set up. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I love the knowing, hey, the story arc is going to happen within this area of what's going to happen, where I'm not going to have too many like, oh, I got to wait till the end of the book or maybe book 2 before I find out what happens. It's you're getting it within the story, but within that same world, same characters. Very well done. I really, really loved that whole aspect of it.
Thank you.
So, Josh, what surprised you most about the strengths and quirks of the writing process when you're writing with Zach?
What surprised me about him, or what surprised me about just writing?
The writing together with your brother.
I think it's hard. I think he's really good at certain things, specifically. Oh, he's gone, but specifically like creative action set pieces. I struggle a lot with action scenes because I want something new. I want something fresh. He's very good at coming up with the most absurd idea I've ever heard, and he makes it work. Like book 2 has one of the greatest action scenes I've ever heard of. You'll have to get to that, but I feel like I'm better at writing the more emotional stuff. Not better, I'm better at it in my own sense. He's definitely got the mind for the action world.
Awesome. What about you, Zach? From your perspective, what surprised you the most about Josh's strengths and quirks when going through and writing together?
Yeah, no, I'll mirror what he said. I definitely think Josh is good at randomly throwing an emotional beat in there. There's some chapters that he wrote kind of in the middle of like, not necessarily a super emotional moment, but a moment of the story where people are kind of down. The moment in the first one that I always think of, and you would know because you read it, is after the events at the steel tower, when they all go back to the cabin. There's a moment where we're in Rachel's perspective, and that scene, the way that different characters in the cabin react to her and tell her like, yeah, you're doing great, or you really messed this whole thing up, like those interactions in that chapter, that's all him. And I was so shocked when I read that because we never talked about it. We never planned those conversations. Josh just had the task of writing the fallout of the steel tower and he created that. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this is great. It's exactly what we needed. I feel for her. I understand how the boys are feeling. Like it actually hit me on an emotional level. And he's continued to do that. He did that in this book 3 that we just wrote. I had a secondary antagonist who was kind of a minor-ish character. Really, my only plans for him was he was kind of a redneck with a crossbow. And I wrote him just kind of like, yeah, he's a body that works for the main antagonist. And by the end of the book, Josh had given him a whole backstory about his mother and like how he was trying to make sure she could still have pills to take care of her because she had this mental condition, and those are really hard to come by these days, in the end of the world. And made you relate to this guy that I only wrote as an asshole with a crossbow. Josh turned him into a sympathetic villain, and I had no plans for that. So I think that's Josh's skill, is he can make you sympathize and he can write emotional beats, and then I'll handle building up the craziness and making shit hit the fan, so to speak.
So Josh is the heart of the story, is what you're saying.
Arguably, yes.
He brings the heart, and you bring the action and the power and the hard hitting moments physically, and Josh brings the emotional heart and beat to this story. Is what I'm hearing.
He brings the muscle, like in real life.
He brings the muscle. There we go.
That's right.
Love it. We have some new, other people that jumped in, and then I want to lean in a little bit to what scene or moment you're most proud of within book 1 is going to be my next question. So we have Miss Molly McCobb. Hello, Molly. So happy you're here. Cannot wait to get to book 2 whenever that comes out. Molly, been hyped out for that. We have Games on the Fly. Hey, appreciate you being here. And so let's jump into what scene or moment you're most proud of. And I want to kind of stick with book 1. Please don't spoil book 2 and book 3 for me. But is there a certain part within book 1 that was hands down your favorite?
I've got mine. Do you have yours?
Ooh, it's tough. I almost feel like you have to do like my favorite that I wrote and my favorite that he wrote. Almost feels like I have to do it that way.
Okay, that sounds good.
I think just off the top of my head, one of my favorite things that he wrote is the finale to the Kennedy story. By the end of the book, there's kind of 2 things going on. There's Thomas's like last stand at the city, and then there's Kennedy's like hunt going on at the church. And Josh completely took the reins on the Kennedy sequence. I took the reins on the Thomas sequence. And there's a lot of like, not just character moments. There's some good character moments in that scene with Cleaver, right? With Rachel and the 3 people that go after her. But it's also very symbolic the way it ends. You got the whole deal. It's set in the church, and the way that Kennedy sees the person that he sees in his head, and then it all ends in the confessional. Like, I'm a big symbolism guy. I love symbolism. I love like especially religious symbolism, playing with that in a story. And I think Josh did a really good job with that set piece. All the characters there contribute, and some aren't as grand in terms of what they accomplish, but it all amounts to a very cool sequence of events. So I think off the top of my head, that's my favorite thing that he wrote. My favorite thing that I wrote goes back to that first chapter that I think I wrote in that book, which is The Wall. I think we ended up splitting it into 2. I think it was a little too long, but that whole sequence where they go back to the lab and then wind up at the cabin and Thomas gets a little high, if you know what I mean. That sequence was just, we play with some things in there that are a little risky. We play with tense perspective a little bit. It's something that would be very difficult to adapt to anything other than a book. just because of how we say things happen. And because of that, I still go back to that as my favorite sequence that I wrote. It's something that we've tried to do similar versions of in the subsequent books, but I don't think we quite match how crazy that one was in the first.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That was a good one. All right, Josh, what about you, man? What's your favorite part?
I mean, I love the scene he wrote that he just talked about, but to avoid repetition, I think there's a scene at the zoo, and I know you know what I'm talking about. And it's where the fan is hit with the shit. And I'm not gonna say exactly what happens there, but the characters are being held against their will. They go through a long walk talking about different symbolism and injustice throughout the city, all of which I had no idea about until he did the research, figured it out. And it culminates in what might be the craziest like action scene in the story. So many people just get like demolished. I loved that scene. I thought it just set the tone for the rest of the book so perfectly. It didn't come across as too goofy despite what happened. I loved that scene.
Yeah. You tweeted, actually. You tweeted at me over books when you read that part.
Oh, yeah. No, that was one of my favorite parts of the whole book. I'm trying not to spoil it. It comes out of nowhere. And it's like, oh man, like it was one of those. There's a few moments. So when I go through and read, I usually start and I'm usually on my couch going through and reading. But there's times where I'm reading a book and I'm up doing laps around the house. And that's when I know I'm so invested in the story. And that scene was one of my laps around the house where I'm just like walking through the kitchen, dining room, and I'm just like doing figure eights, just holding a book, making noises to myself, going, oh. And it was fantastic. It was so much fun. But yeah, that was a fantastic scene. That scene, and then the other scene of my favorite that I might need to talk about it offline because I don't want to spoil something. But there's a scene where things look so bad that yeah, I'll talk about it off. I don't want to spoil it. There's you do something to a character, and I'm not very happy with both of you about what you did to my boy. He was one of my favorites, and you decided to go, I don't like him anymore. And you went through and did some bad things to him. But anyway, we'll switch gears before I spoil something. But yeah, that's what I think I really love about this story is you think you know where it's going based off of familiar tropes, and you guys find a way to change it up a little bit. It's still a lot of fun. It definitely feels like a show, and that video game love, you can feel it in the story, but there's so much more depth and heart and symbolism. I'm so happy you said that, Zach, that you're a big fan of symbolism. I am too. Like, I love finding little Easter eggs within stories and love going, I think this is what the author was trying to go through and say within this subject matter or this certain aspect of the story. So I really love that you guys really put in that extra work into this story because it's a lot of fun and a lot of action, but there's a lot of heart as well within the story. So before we continue with this book, I'm curious, when you guys aren't writing or editing, what do you guys do to decompress? Is it the video games? Is there something else you guys like to go through and do to kind of to decompress a little bit?
I think it comes back to music. I love driving around listening to music, and I live really close to just a lot of roads. There's nobody on them. I love just driving around. We do play a lot of video games. Marvel Rivals has held too much of our attention over the past couple months, I think. But yeah, I love consuming media. I think I used to watch those YouTube videos that were like the entirety of a movie in 20 minutes. And so I could tell you the plots to so many movies I haven't even seen. And I just love consuming information. And I think in a way it helps me know what's been done before, what hasn't been done.
It stimulates ideas. I'd say together, the thing we do the most is video games. We don't live right next to each other. We're about 2 hours away. So whenever we want to talk about writing, share ideas, the easiest thing for us to do is to take our short attention spans and play video games and then talk while we're playing video games. Whether that's, like he said, Marvel Rivals or Call of Duty, Fallout, whatever. We played a lot of Ghost Recon. We'll talk while we're playing those games and brainstorm, and there's a lot of outlines we've put together just through voice chat on PlayStation. In my own spare time, I like to listen to music while I work out. So I lift a lot of weights. Lately, I've been running, which isn't the most fun thing in the world, but it kind of allows me to almost meditate. Just be in my own head and think and listen to something, and that gives me a lot of time to reflect and brainstorm. So exercise for me is a big meditation thing. It's a way for me to reset and just be in my own head.
So you mentioned at the beginning that a lot of the locations in this story is based off of real places, or they actually are the real places, or they're related to real places. I'm assuming you guys did a lot of research within this book, and I'm kind of curious on what did that research process look like? Obviously, there's no zombies, so it's not like you can go out and fight zombies. But I kind of want to hear you guys' research process on what did you research, what didn't you? I'm just really curious a little bit if you could elaborate on that process.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I went to Pittsburgh. So I've been to the city. I got to visit a lot of these locations, like Point State Park. We use Google Maps if we're not sure of something. So when we kind of map the journey of our characters in any of the books, we'll just look up the city on Google Maps, and we'll kind of hone in and say, this is where this character is, what's around. If Nick and Harvey are hustling down this street by the Allegheny River, what might they happen across? And sometimes we find little businesses that we then warp into our own version of that business, or maybe there's a significant park there or an old building, and we'll just say this is something that they might come across, and then we'll turn that into a scene. And so that's how we ended up with the Steel Tower sequence. That's how we ended up with them coming upon the barn with the horse when they left the Zeppelin. Just stuff that's around wherever they happen to be traveling at. And obviously, because the story is set in an alternate 1980s, we have to take that extra step of looking up, saying, was this here, 40 years ago? That's why it takes place at Three Rivers Stadium in the beginning, because that stadium is no longer operational, I believe. That was the 80s stadium. So we have to tailor it to that time period. But a lot of Google Maps, and then a little bit of visiting, seeing the place for ourselves.
So within Thomas and Kennedy, was there one character, Josh, that you identified more with? Did you identify with Thomas or Kennedy more, or was there another character that you personally identified more with?
I mean, as an 18-year-old, it's hard to say I identify with the super spy, but I definitely liked his mindset about things a lot more when writing it. I think as a default, Zach usually wrote more of the Thomas stuff. I usually wrote more of the Kennedy stuff. That especially bleeds into the second one, where I did a lot more of the Kennedy. I think the character I would have resonated the most with is probably Huey, which makes sense. He's the youngest member of the band. His arc is one of my favorite things that we were able to accomplish. And that's probably it.
What about you, Zach?
Yeah, no, I would echo that. I'd say my life experience isn't particularly similar to either. We like to invent a character. We don't necessarily base characters on ourselves. There's only so much that we have to pull from. So, I definitely took to writing Thomas a lot more, just because I adopted that side of the story. Kennedy is a lot of fun to write. Kennedy's perspective on things is just so unique. Like his personality is very, what's the weirdest thing I could say right now in reaction to what's happening? And that's part of why we wrote the prequel novella with him, just because he was such a good personality. We really wanted to do more with it. So a spy thriller story from his head was a lot of fun to write. But yeah, I mean, we kind of pick and choose, as we go in the books, like which character do we want to write more of? And I definitely think Josh took to Kennedy more, at least in the Continuum series. He's taken to Kennedy more.
So we have a question from Cinna. Cinna's a huge audiobook fan. She wants to know if there's any plans for an audiobook.
Yes, we have plans. We need money, unfortunately. So if anybody in there, even if you're not going to read it, if you want to buy the book to fund the audiobook, that'd be awesome. But yeah, we have plans. We want to make sure we do it right. We don't want to use an AI or a digital reader because we don't think that would capture emotion properly. We want to pay a real person to do it or do it ourselves. And either way, it costs money. You need the equipment. You need time. Time is money, right? Instead of working, you're doing this. So it's an investment that we're working on. And, in a few months, I'm going to have, my military career is going to be starting. So I'm going to be saving up a lot more money. Ideally, at some point within the next few years, we'll at the very least have some money saved up that we can pay somebody to do it for us. And then we can get a real good audiobook that we can put out there and be proud of.
Perfect. I am going to mirror exactly what Cinna said. If you do a Kickstarter, you at least have two of us. Two of us are down. Cinna and I we got the top. Got you. We got you. Yeah. No, I think an audiobook would be great, but I cannot agree more. You got to find that right voice and do it right the first time, because it's a fantastic story, and finding someone who can bring all these characters. Again, I've only read book one, and you have a massive amount of characters in here with their own voice and personalities and reasonings for doing the things that they do, and you want to go through and actually find someone who can bring them to life for those individuals that want to listen to an audio. So yeah, I completely get that.
Absolutely.
So this story, at least from my perspective, had a big anti-establishment, anti-corporation themes throughout the story. Is that something you guys did on purpose within the story? Did they kind of just come out itself throughout the story?
I mean, like I said, I started this during quarantine, and so I don't know if it was subconscious or if he meant it, but a lot of the groups sort of resemble different groups that were around during quarantine. You got people that kind of don't care about like the infection going on. It doesn't matter. You have this authoritarian group. I don't think we demonize the National Guard. At least I would like to think that they're semi-redeemable. You can understand where they're coming from. I'd like to think that about everybody in the story. I don't think we necessarily hate any of the groups.
Yeah, I mean, it's that punk rock setting that comes out, with 80s rock. It's like there's a little bit of anti-establishment kind of inherent in that, just aesthetic. Thomas is obviously that way. One of the first things that happens in this book is Thomas spends some time in that shelter, in that Zeppelin, and they all have their uniforms that they wear. And one day Thomas just says, you know what? I'm going to wear my lavender jacket that I wore on stage. And I'm going to wear that today. And that's the day that everything goes to hell. and I end up having to leave. So the story gets spurred on by that choice. But that is an inherently Thomas decision. All the characters behave as they should, right? The National Guard has the interest of the governor and the public in mind. They're doing what the National Guard would do. These mobs that are trying to care for their own people, sometimes being a little cruel in order to do it, that's what they would do to survive. Kennedy has his own mission that he's pursuing. Kennedy is establishment, right? He is that government, but at the same time, he's kind of become disillusioned with it. And so these characters all go on their own journey within this world. And yeah, the aesthetic is punk rock, but these characters are each on their own journey. And that's the most important thing to us, is that the characters are nuanced and they have their own experience.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, you definitely did that and brought it out within these characters. All right, we are on what I like to call the lightning round. Anyone that is not familiar with this section of these interviews, I like to go through and ask my authors questions, and they need to go through and answer off the top of their head without thinking. So since we have two authors, again, it's the first time, I'm going to switch off every question I have. Instead of just rapid firing at one of you, you get the switch off, so you get a time to breathe a little bit between the questions. So I'm going to start with Josh with the first one. Okay, you ready for? Perfect.
Gotcha.
So when you're writing, do you like it being silent, or do you like listening to music?
I like music.
Music? What kind of music do you like?
I like soulful music.
Soulful music when you're writing. Interesting. Okay. Zach, do you write on a laptop, or do you prefer to write things out by hand?
Oh, laptop.
Laptop.
The only thing I'll ever do by hand is I might take notes by hand on like a legal pad, but writing, it's always going to be laptop. Always.
All right. Josh, what is Kennedy's theme song, if he had a theme song?
Working for the Weekend.
Perfect. Zach, what's a fictional character you would team up with in the Three Rivers Plague apocalyptic world?
Oh, somebody.
And it could be any fictional character. It does not have to be from your story. Any fictional character.
Oh, that I would throw into the story.
That you would be in with to survive.
Oh yeah. Jack Reacher.
That's exactly who I was thinking. Get out of my head. That's awesome.
Yeah, give me that guy.
All right. Josh, are you a morning writer or a midnight madness kind of writer?
3 a.m.
3 a.m. So midnight madness. Awesome. So Zach, what is your favorite post-apocalyptic movie?
Ooh, post-apocalyptic movie. I'm gonna. Oh, you know what? The Postman. Give me The Postman with Kevin Costner. That movie's awesome.
Josh, what's one book you wish you wrote?
Slip Space Terra Nullius.
Okay, I do not know what that is.
That's my book. That's my book that I wrote.
Oh. Okay, perfect. All right, Zach, going back to your story, if you had to survive in your story, the world of Three Rivers Plague, what's your weapon of choice?
Oh, my weapon of choice. It seems like the best weapon to have is something that is like an object that doesn't run out of ammunition.
Mm-hmm.
I'd honestly go with like maybe like a machete. I don't know, something that like because I'm not going to be picking fights with the zombies in the story. You know, you're going to get overwhelmed. You're not looking for fights. You just need something that you can quietly fend them off with, like get a single kill and not be heard. And I feel like the best thing is a mobile blade, like a machete.
Okay. This last one's going to be for both of you. So whoever wants to answer it, go ahead. If your whole series, so your 3-book series you have so far, if it could have a theme song for your books, what would be the theme song for your story?
Ooh. Theme song. I feel like it's got to be one of the episode names. What comes to mind, Josh?
I think it might be Cold as Ice by Foreigner.
I don't know if it's that one. I don't know if I agree with that.
I think
I'm a lot more tempted to say Freebird. I think Freebird, the crescendo of gradually getting more intense and then just going off the rails. I think I'll say Freebird.
Perfect. I like them both. Those are great. I don't think you mentioned the episodes. All the titles of the episodes are based off songs, at least in book 1.
Yeah,
Oh,
60s to
yeah.
80s rock
Yeah.
songs.
Yeah, I don't think we mentioned that. They're
No.
all like that. So it's a lot of fun going through and be like, oh, I kind of get an understanding of what's going to happen based off of the title. How did you guys come up with that idea? Was that just, hey, let's do this, this would be awesome kind of thing? Or did you think of that from the beginning?
No, I don't even know whose idea it was. I don't remember.
Believe it or not, our original plan was for every chapter to be named after a song from the 60s to 80s. And mind you, there are 76 chapters in book 1. So we quickly abandoned that idea. I think we made it maybe halfway to 2/3 through the book before we said, you know what, this is too much. We started naming chapters after just random unrelated songs, and we were like, okay, it's not working. So we split it up. We said, let's do 9 song names, and that was a lot more manageable. It kind of reflected the general sense of the episode rather than something super specific.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked a lot better. But we do that for all 3 books in the series. Every book, not even just Continuum, because Continuum was the first series we wrote. But in Slip Space, I do the same thing, but I use country music. And then in Long Caldera Run, there's 4 episodes, and we use old rock music from that era, from the 70s.
What was the name of that second series? Long what?
Long Caldera Run is the prequel novella.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I just had Cadera written before, so Long Caldera Run.
Long Caldera Run. It's a city in Chile.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I definitely need to go through and check that out because I love a good novella story, and based off how you guys write, and I kind of know, have an idea of what it's going to be about, so it should be fantastic. All right, so that was fun. I appreciate you guys being sports for the lightning round of ridiculousness. So jumping back into looking forward with your books, if you could see your books adapted, what would be your dream medium? Would it be film? Would it be a TV series, a video game? What would be your dream medium for your guys' story?
I think the easiest answer, because it's an episodic structure, is a TV show. But I've always wanted a Fallout style game. I think you'd have to set it after the events of the story. You couldn't make you play as Thomas. Just use our world, let you make your own character, pick what group you want to join. I think that'd be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think it would be possible to turn it into a movie. I think it would need to be a lot shorter. And just the fact that there are multiple climaxes because it's episodic, I think it would be too difficult to turn it into a movie. It would have to change. Fundamentally, the story would have to change for that to work. Long Caldera Run could be a movie because it's shorter and it's kind of one mission. I don't believe that Three Rivers Plague could be a movie. I think you'd have to either do a series, kind of how it's structured now, or, as Josh said, you could make it some kind of game, either switching between characters or just use the world or something, or give us a Smash Bros. Game with the characters from the book, and then give them their own abilities, something like that too.
I think what Trinity said is a fantastic idea.
Graphic
is making
novel.
it into a graphic novel, kind of like how, I don't know if you guys are familiar or fans of graphic novels, but kind of how the Walking Dead graphic novel was before it became a series. I honestly think that is a fantastic idea. I think, again, I agree, a TV series would be good, but you would need some funds for what kind of total chaos you guys did in these books to make it bounce off the screen. So yeah, I think starting out, just do a graphic novel. I feel like when you guys start your Kickstarter for your audiobook, try to do a graphic novel also. I think do 2 in 1, man. Go for it. Swing for the fences.
If we're talking about realistic, it's definitely a lot more plausible.
Yeah.
I love Walking Dead, so I definitely know all about that. there has to be an audience for it, and then we can actually raise the funds.
All right, we need to make it happen. We need to make it happen. We need to make it happen. I need to see an adaptation of the story. I need to get this eyeballs in front of more people. I think it'd be awesome. But yeah, see, we're getting a lot of people. Stretch goals, 8-episode miniseries. Yep. We'll buy some merch. We got some. Yeah. We have not cheap, but super cool. I think that's right. Love the graphic novel idea. See, we have some fans on here who want to see it happen. Yeah, I can't agree more between audiobook, the book, and graphic novel. I'm just going to keep saying it because it's going to end up, I'm just hoping if I say it enough, it gets put onto the universe and makes it happen. Just like some of my other random, ridiculous ideas I have. But this one, I think this one's actually realistic. I think you guys can do it. I think it's plausible. So I'm here to support you guys. So whatever you guys need, I got you. I'm not good at drawing. I can do stick figures pretty well. So if you guys need that, we'll go there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Girlfriend's pretty good at that at art. So.
And stick figures.
And stick figures. There.
Stick figures too, but she made some art for us. We actually had some trading cards that we made with our characters on them. Did I send you those?
I did. They are something my kids play with constantly in the house.
Yeah.
So they love it. They have a blast. They have a blast with them. They're always between. It sits with their. So they're really in the Pokemon cards right now. So you have their Pokemon cards and then your guys' characters with the Pokemon cards. So they make up a game that they play and they throw the cards down at each other. And your guys' cards are their special cards that they throw down. They're like, bam, and they win every time. So it's
shoot. Okay.
Yeah. I'll take a picture of them playing it next time with it and flip it to you guys so you can see it. So they love it. It's too much fun.
And please do. Yeah.
So let's I'm curious about any future works. You guys planning on doing any series together? Any other series after Continuum? Is the third book the final book, or you plan on having more?
You wish it was the final book.
There's plenty more. We've had this idea for how to wrap up the series for a very long time, but we keep sticking more stories in front of it because we don't want it to end. So initially we were going to get to this like finale. It's going to be a 2-part finale. And we were like, oh, let's do this after the first book and we'll make it a trilogy. But then we said, we kind of want to explore like New York a little bit. So we wrote book 2 and we invented that whole story from scratch. And I love book 2. Book 2 might be my favorite of the 3. But then we're like, okay, now we'll get into the 2-part finale. And we're like, no, we just introduced this like young character and he kind of needs more development with Thomas. Why don't we send them on this little journey and we'll write another book. So we wrote book 3 from scratch. And book 3 might be our best book so far. And so we keep coming up with new stuff. Now we're talking about doing a 4th book back in Pennsylvania. And then we're going to do the finale. And God knows when we're actually going to get there. But as of right now, it's at least a 6-book series whenever we get to it. Hopefully not too long from now.
I love to hear that. That makes me so excited. And that doesn't include any random novellas you guys are going to be tossing in there going, hey, we need to have another prequel to this other character's story. So that's awesome. So at least 6. So we're maybe not on the halfway point.
Just about, at least for Thomas's story. Thomas, because we have the prequel with Kennedy, and there's the thought that we might extend that series out, because his prequel story, Long Caldera Run, takes place a good 8-10 years before the main series. So there's more adventures for him if we want to tell more spy thrillers. It's just, do we want to? The story works on its own, even though it's so far back. It works as its own introduction to Kennedy. But there could always be another adventure. So that's kind of our segue into spy thrillers if we want to. Obviously, I have Slip Space that I write on my own, which is a completely different world. It's sci-fi. Been playing around with ideas for a sequel for a while. Haven't gotten to it. We've just been so focused on Continuum. So we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. We've got plenty of ideas.
Love it. Do you want to give a quick? I'm curious about Slip Space. Honest, to be all transparent with you, Zach, I didn't know you had your own solo book out there. You want to tell us a little bit about Slip Space?
Sure. So real quick, Slip Space is about this far future, almost far enough in the future that it's basically a different galaxy. The Terran Straits Republic is kind of the humanity, like galactic empire, and humans are called Terrans. And they've just recently turned their military into about 50% plus artificials, which is what I call like robots. And that's done in the interest of protecting lives and, sending them on more dangerous missions. But my main character, his name is Slip McMahon. That's why it's called Slip Space. He was a captain in the military, in the Terran Straits military. And he didn't like the idea that all of his compatriots were being replaced with machines. So he quits, and in order to make money, he has to do mercenary work. But his brother, Breath, works for the Terran government as almost like a CIA type character who hunts down, wanted people and that kind of thing. And so they kind of butt heads a little bit. They're both trying to take care of the family, but they have different outlooks on the world and life and, what it means to be a soldier. And Slip gets tasked with a very important mission to protect this young girl who's hiding some secrets about, the galaxy and has this hidden power to her. And, these two brothers kind of battle over possession of her, and Slip kind of takes a liking to her a little bit. It's kind of a found family story a little bit with this disgruntled veteran in space.
Can I say how awesome not only your Continuum series covers, and I had to look this up for this cover because I just had a feeling it was another killer cover. This is a fantastic looking cover. I had to share it. It looks awesome. I don't know if it does its justice on the screen, but man, this thing looks amazing. Like, seriously.
Thank you. Our Continuum covers are by J. Caleb Designs. He's fantastic. He did our cover for Long Caldera Run as well. This book cover was actually a pre-made cover by Rockin' Book Covers. And it looks very, very similar to the first planet in the book, in Slip Space. Mm-hmm. It's like rocky, kind of drained ocean. The whole deal with that planet is that the tides rise and fall really quickly because there's two moons kind of circling, battling for direction. Mm-hmm. And so Slip has to go into this facility for a meeting as the tide subsides and then get out before it comes back. So this kind of matched that drained ocean look that I was going for. So it's kind of a match made in heaven. There's a really good pre-made cover, and I just had to grab it.
No, it looks fantastic. It looks so good. Yeah, you're killing it on the covers, fellas. Killing it.
Thank you very much.
So at this point of you guys being authors, I'm curious, what does success look like for you guys, in your opinion?
Success. Interestingly enough, Slip Space was our first profitable book. Slip Space has paid for itself, in part because of a lot of attention I got a few months back during a sci-fi competition. So that's kind of like the first target, is like, can the book pay for itself? Mm-hmm. Once the book pays for itself, it's all uphill from there. You want to try to make your money back with marketing and stuff, but at least you can say, okay, I'm out of the hole with this book. So for the Continuum series, that's kind of a good first goal, is we want the series to pay for itself, and then we just want to run consistent marketing. And if we can get more eyes on it, regular buyers. We're already kind of at that point where we have regular readers every month, but just a bigger audience that can talk to the book, can talk to us about the book like you are right here, which is always wonderful, and just people talking about it. That's really the end goal, I think, is have the book pay for itself, and then just keep getting more people to see it, because we love hearing feedback, we love reviews, we love these kinds of conversations.
Perfect. So what kind of readers do you think is going to resonate most with Three Rivers Plague, the Continuum series?
It's a hard question. I feel like it's such a blend of different genres. It's hard for me to say that one specific reader is going to like it. I wouldn't go into it looking for romance, obviously. It feels like if you're into thrillers, just thrillers in general, I feel like we take a lot of that kind of tone. It's paced like a thriller. It's the story of an apocalypse. And I think
There's a little bit of romance. I wouldn't. Yeah. It's not an inherently romance novel. I find that romance novels tend to be romance first, and then the setting is secondary to that. These books are definitely like thriller style. Like Josh said, they're paced like a thriller. They've got the adrenaline of a thriller. And then the world tends to be a little bit sci-fi. But we try to incorporate a little bit of romance. I find that just a sprinkle of romance helps any book, really. I'm not ashamed to admit that I enjoy romance in my thrillers. I enjoy when there's a little bit. But I'd say we're sci-fi thrillers for the most part. If you really want to condense it into one subgenre, we're mostly sci-fi thrillers. Or if you're like Richard, you could call it a rockalypse.
Mm-hmm. And I think as the stories go on, family becomes a really important aspect of it. And so if you want a protagonist with some heart who cares about his family, it's definitely for that.
Yeah, our books are big on family, especially in the third one we just wrote. Fatherhood's a big part of it. Even in that first book, like with the Kennedy story and with the ending, like there's a lot of care for kids, like the youth, and it's kind of a soft spot for a lot of characters. People don't like to see kids get hurt, and that plays into the family. Like that's who we are as people. We protect the vulnerable. So that's definitely in all the books too. Slip Space is the same way, very family oriented, and just lots of symbolism, lots of like character work. That's the kind of stuff we like to play to. Thank you, E.L. Montague. Yeah, I can change the color of that shelf lighting. So I have it green for Three Rivers Plague right now. So I wanted to, I could make it orange for the newest one, or I could do like purple or something for Slip Space. But I always like to make it relevant to the current topic.
Love it. It's I need to get those fancy lighting stuff. I've been looking at stuff for interviews because I have your books right here. I don't know if you can really tell, but they're there. They look fantastic. But I need some lighting. To be able to make them pop when they're behind me during these conversations. But it's all here. It looks great. So I'm super hyped knowing that the third book's not the last one. I can honestly say that I am over the moon excited that there's a lot more chaos coming down the pipeline within these stories. And I'm very, very excited. So I really do appreciate you guys being on. How can people go through and connect with you and find your books? What's the best way for people to support you guys and all the amazing things you do?
Definitely. I use Twitter the most, Twitter X, whatever you call it. I think social media in general, as of late, has gotten a lot harder to meet people, to get attention on. I think a lot of it has to do with AI content. kind of just flooding the servers. But all across the board, Instagram, Facebook, everything's just gotten a little bit harder to use. But still, I'm pushing through it. I'm on X. If you ever want to reach out to me or you ever want to check out what I'm up to, I would say follow my X account. I usually follow back unless you look like a scammer or a bot or something. I tend to follow people back. If you want to buy our books, the link is in my bio to our Amazon, or you can just look us up on Amazon. You look up Zachary Forbes, Joshua Forbes, or Three Rivers Plague. Our book is the only book with that title. It'll come up with us, and then you can see the whole Continuum series linked from there.
Perfect.
Yep.
Josh, how can people connect with you? Is it the same on X?
Yeah,
social media is the best avenue.
I'm not nearly as active on social media as he is. I go on maybe once a week and respond to a couple people. If you want to see what we're doing, you either talk to him on Twitter or you find my address.
They give him a visit.
Perfect. All right. So if you want to go through and support the Forbes brothers, either find Zach on X or go to Josh's house and he will. Things are perfect. But I will also have a link to you guys' books down in the description. I really, again, I've been hyping this book up this whole conversation. I also did a review of this book as well. It's fantastic, guys. Go through and check it out. It's so much fun, and I promise you will not be disappointed. So, fellas, again, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me today. I've had so much fun, and all the people in the chat, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Until next time, thank you so much. Have a fantastic evening, and stay overbooked.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.